I'm here to share a lot of knowledge which we've gained so far in helping companies with their digital transformation journey, and it has been a real interesting case, I must say. I've got a few examples. I cannot share them, all of them, but I try to share as much as I can. I put a small agenda on it. The first, I want to dive a little bit into, well, the impact as I see them on the digital transformation, also the financial side, and then dive into the organizational part of it, and then finally, okay, how you can, as an HR professional, learning development professional, help management or the organization to, be prepared, because there's a storm coming up. Who am I? I'm Hans Molenaar. I'm director of Bekenstein Business School. I've also been chairman of a transformation platform so far, which is focused on innovation. Throughout all my career, I was always interested in how IT can impact organizations. I've worked for American companies, AT&T and NCR, which is an IT company. Did some startups, and also was in a weird experience was that the startup was taken over by a big bank, which was also very interesting to opposite types of organizations. So I will share that, and I'm a father of 4 kids who keep me young, and I still know what Snapchat and all those new developments are. But wouldn't it be nice if we knew each other already, if I already knew you, because then I could be better to, let's say, give this presentation. It would be nice, so that as an individual, I would say, okay, that's your background, and that's your interest. You might probably know, but this is let's say, a guy who's quite familiar in Dutch television program. Who's, by the way, Dutch and who isn't Dutch? Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. Oh, there's a few Dutch things are in it, so sorry about that. But
I'm not Dutch, but I can read it.
You can read it. Okay. But who's familiar with Crystal Knows? Crystal Knows. So if you have your LinkedIn and you have Crystal Knows attached to it, you can get a fairly, let's say, good insight who this guy is. And I plotted together with a colleague of me, Egbert Jan. And then I could also plot, without already knowing each other, who they are and where they are on a personal basis. And this guy works for Crystal Knows. And they also have now developed a kind of working style. So what you can do is already find a little bit out who people are. And that's completely open. The point I want to make is that this knowledge is available already. And a lot of organizations are using it, and the question is, can you use it, yes or no? I can imagine as an HR professional, you might already select some persons on profiles or personalities instead of just a CV. This is there. So if you have your LinkedIn, you can go to Crystal Knows, you attach it to it, you get a free view, you can samples, credits you can use, and then you can start with it. So also if you, for instance, in a sales position, it's very interesting to use this information. But imagine that in the future, my market automation will be connected to these kind of systems and already can really personalize what I'm trying to say. And this is already around. And what we see more and more is that algorithms is dominating, let's say, how we interact more and more. Not completely, but we all know, let's say, the disaster of Cambridge Analytics. But there's a lot of information available, and algorithms decide who we're going to meet and what Facebook is displaying to me and not to you. So what we're seeing now in digital environments is that data, but also algorithms are, let's say, can help us in, let's say, doing a better job. But also big companies like Philips are also changing their, let's say, the way they do business. In the past, they were mainly making big equipment, and they're now trying to create apps, create solutions for other people. And then you see also a strange company working together, like an Amazon and a Philips and an insurance company. So that's why we see more and more in this digital age that things are moving faster, but also unusual corporations we see more and more. especially in the financial environment. For instance, this is an example from ABN AMRO. I'm not sure whether from ABN AMRO somebody is here, but a lot of new technology companies are founded, sometimes under the brand, sometimes not under the brand, just trying to see whether this business makes sense. And you see it also in the publishing area. Everything which is digital goes a little bit faster than, let's say, the physical world. And so you see new kind of business models establishing. A year ago, we had BMW in our course, and they're following a course of customer experience, and they had an issue. They said, well, let's say 4 years ago, the communication between, let's say, a customer and a salesperson who was buying a BMW 3 or 5 was 4 times. There was 4 times kind of contact. What do you think what was, let's say, a year ago? How many times is still contact between a salesperson and a customer? 1.1. That means that companies get less the opportunity to influence and to, let's say, establish a customer relations. And what we see more and more is that, let's say, buyers already know a lot of information, have already gone through a kind of decision process before they even start talking to a salesperson. So a big part of the whole customer journey has been, let's say, already done before we get in contact. The problem, however, is that salespersons, for instance, it's getting tougher and tougher to get to add any value to that conversation. So while companies are investing heavily in digital, the rest, for instance, sales, having a bigger problem. And the customer experience is for a big part dominated still by this one contact, let's say, in terms of with BMW and the salesperson. So you get a weird situation that we have a very small window of opportunity to get a customer connection and to create a good customer experience. And the biggest part of the whole customer experience is done by service and sales. So what we see also more and more is that people are not advertising, they are sharing content. This is an example from Rabobank, who has won a B2B award. They invested in a big portal, I'm going to start, which is basically aimed at companies who are entrepreneurs who want to start a company. They said it took us 1.5 years to get results. So you see a big shift in how companies are operating, communicating, and also dealing with sales, service, and marketing. Any idea who this could be? What company could be behind this? Working Trends. What do you think? What could be a logical company who, let's say, tried to get in contact with? This is Hans, who's specialized in health. There's big data in the health sector. What kind of company could be behind this? Consultancy or an IT firm? Sorry? Health insurance, yeah. Sorry about this. There's a little bit noise coming from back. No, it's Rico. And if you click on Hans, you see it's a senior account manager. So what you see more and more is that companies are not advertising. They try to get, based on content, get in contact with their customers. And you might say, so what? What does it mean for me as an HR professional? Why are you telling this? Well, what we see is that if you look to, let's say, how the buying circle is, that, for instance, people are aware of a kind of service until purchasing, that in the past, it was a lead generated and it was handed over to sales. Now you see that it is much later in the whole process, it has been done. So the window of opportunity for sales is getting less and less. That means also that a lot of companies have too much sales and not enough, for instance, on marketing side. And I see a lot of companies struggling with that fact, and nobody is admitting it because the general impression is that sales is delivering revenue and marketing is costing money. So a lot of organizations haven't been able to, let's say, to align these kind of resources. Yeah, I'm going to share this. Yes, it's also on film, so you don't need to take notes. It will be you can see it afterwards. But a lot of companies don't even know this that is happening because sales is not going to tell it. But we see, let's say, we have a lot of people taking courses with us, and they are struggling with that. And the main reason why this, anybody have any idea why this is? Why is this happening? Yeah, it's a good answer. There's a lot of opportunities to get in contact. For instance, if I want to sell to ING, I can make sure that all IP addresses of ING, if ING personnel somewhere, I can advertise. I can get in contact. I can even see what ING is on my website. There's a lot of technology available to target via social media, via other portals. That's one big reason. The main reason is that sales is rewarded on revenue, marketing on leads, and service on cost. And that's not an ideal, let's say, recipe for, let's say, customer satisfaction. So there's a lot of, that's why I'm sharing this with you. This is where let's say, on the HR side, a lot of companies are not, let's say, aligned. And there has to be some readjustments. The other big thing which we see is that we all know the adoption curve of Rogers. Where we said it starts with early adopters, the early majority, and then the late majority, and then the rest. What we now see are some signals, and we call it the shark fin. So product life cycle is getting shorter and shorter. It means that in the past, I could jump on this wagon here and still make money. Now it's getting difficult for companies. If I miss these signals, it's hardly impossible to still be in business. And that's another thing which forces companies to, let's say, adjust their strategy. And there's a nice book from Larry Downs about, the Big Bang disruption. And it is getting shorter and shorter. And this is where we see less and less. You see, for instance, some like Pokemon or other, it's a hype and then it's gone. So it's a challenge for all of us to, let's say, make sure that we can have a business which, let's say, which can last for a certain amount of time and to make some money. That means that in the past we had a strategy, which we then tested, adjust a little bit, and then we start rolling it out. And that is becoming less and less an option. We cannot, let's say, do real market research, and we cannot really test because then the market opportunity is already gone. There's a very nice letter from Jeff Bezos to his shareholders. He said, I disagree but commit. We don't have the time to convince each other. So basically, let's do it, let's try it, and if it fails, okay, so be it. And that's the kind of mode we're moving into. And it's a completely different way of strategy and organizing and dealing with personnel. So what we now see more and more, okay, we think this might work, we make some prototypes, we're going to test it, and then we're going to see what's happening. So if a product's already almost there, we're going to launch it and make sure that we get feedback and then adjust it. And it keeps going and going. So you see a lot of companies now also organizing. They don't have product managers anymore, they don't have brand managers anymore, they have customer journey managers. And they're trying to optimize the customer journey parts of it. And they're responsible for that. So what we had in the past is this big strategy and then make sure that you are right and then do the investments. That's becoming a little bit difficult because of this turmoil. So the other question you might say, why is digital so high on the agenda? Well, what you see in the past is that you had a producer, some Dutch in there, and then you had the wholesale, the retail, and then it was in a shop or it was sent at home. What you see now is everybody's going direct. You see everybody's competing with each other. Brands are going direct, wholesalers are going direct, business models are changing. Some you cooperate, some you compete. So it's not an option anymore that in this nice world where everything was real, well, quite stable, there were, let's say, no channel conflicts. That's going to happen. So everybody's going more and more direct, and there's no options. And some companies have a good model, like, for instance, G-Star. They sell direct, but the delivery is done by the shops. So you see, everybody's trying to find a way to, let's say, best of both worlds, because some smaller companies cannot have a good website. It's just too expensive. But the bigger companies cannot wait on the smaller channels to make sure that they got an online presence. There was also an interesting study of McKinsey between 2010 and 2015 about the financial impact. And what they've done is they take the top 25 digital companies and compare them with the laggards. And you see big, let's say, differences in terms of operating profit, but also in growth. And a a lot of people thought, well, the business is not going well because of the crisis, but you see that there's a big correlation of companies who are going bankrupt and who haven't invested a lot in digital. And you also see it on e-commerce. And that's a big debate in a lot of companies. Should we do e-commerce? And the big mistake often people make is, well, we got our sales, so we add a channel with extra costs, so why bother? What a lot of companies found out is that if you do e-commerce, you got about 30% extra revenue. It's the same as you, for instance, open a shop longer on a Sunday, some revenue will come, which normally from restaurants or other channels. So let's say a few companies can afford not to go directly e-commerce-wise, but you see, let's say the financial results are quite, well, impressive. And of course, it can differ per let's say, sector. But the biggest opponent is often sales, because they are not seeing the value in it. In the beginning, it starts small, but in the long run, it's an option which hardly a company can refuse. And in my opinion, we haven't seen nothing yet. If you see business-wise, we start, let's say, e-business courses in 2000. So, and then we, let's say the economy collapsed a little bit and it rised again. And I think we now see, and you see the marketing side picked up very quickly in digital because the customers were online, but now see also the services side picking up, and also a lot of companies adding digital layers into their products and services. So this is a study from Gartner. They say, well, we are now in this area moving to, let's say, digital business. And what do I mean? Yeah, we all probably know the Dash Knop from Amazon, Alexa, where you talk to, Nest, all kind of devices. And but also in the B2B sector, if you look, for instance, companies like Caterpillar, they have an all augmented reality around their trucks and heavy equipment. So, for instance, if I put a glass on, I can see where the filter is, where some maintenance has to be done. So you see a lot of companies now investing in digital layers on physical products. I'm not sure whether in November, Michael Porter had a nice article in the Harvard Business Review. He said, basically, every company should have an augmented reality strategy. Now, Porter normally has a quite good view on strategy and what's going to happen. We see augmented reality is a big thing in a lot of industries now. The biggest startup now is based on augmented reality. If you look, for instance, we all know Google Glass, but for instance, Microsoft is now investing heavily in HoloLens. You see a lot of changes, and that, for instance, it can be that I can now export a complicated product to Australia, but with a augmented reality glass, I don't need any support infrastructure anymore. So it brings also down the layers of competition, and which in the past was, let's say, difficult to export these kind of equipment. With this kind of digital layers on top of it, it becomes easier. And you might be in an industry which you feel, okay, it's not going to happen. This will bring down the barriers of entry. And you see, for instance, in Stuttgart, Bosch is investing heavily in Internet of Things. They're all connected, often cars, factories, or windmills. But also, for instance, companies like General Electric. They don't sell engines anymore. They sell kilometers. And by sensors, and because everything is connected, they can maintain that and at a very low level offer these kind of services. So what we always talked about, we should offer services instead of products, now basically going to happen because the infrastructure is there. The technology is there, and this will bring competition to, let's say, another level. In Holland, we got Rabobank. They now have launched a kind of financial application. It's not for them to, let's say, be in the application business, but they want to get in contact with their customers. So they use, let's say, a piece of software so small companies can do the bookkeeping in order to sell financial services. And that's what things we see more and more, and what we call then, digital business. And that's beyond, let's say, what we did in the past, communicating something, hopefully somebody is interested, and then try to sell a certain product. Another interesting example is, for instance, John Deere. They make very expensive trucks. They have a big competition from Chinese and Indian factories. And they also thought about how we're going to compete in the long run. So what they also did is they now have a whole range of services around their equipment to make sure that the cost of ownership goes lower and lower. And that started not immediately. They started with small apps. The first one they launched was Machine Finder to make sure that their customers could easily sell the second-handed equipment. And they now have, for instance, IT services to make sure that the availability is high, to make sure that the customers can make the most return on their equipment. And once it's there, customers not easily going to switch to another one. So that's what big B2B companies are doing. And they recently bought, for instance, a company which uses drones to fly over airfields, over crops. So this information is then used in their equipment to make sure that the fields are, let's say, better operated. So, and then they become, let's say, from a tractor to, let's say, a complete farm management system. And I just try to tell you, to try to picture you, let's say, what's happening with companies around us, which, let's say, moving, let's say, the barriers and changing basically business models. And that is not going to happen overnight. Another interesting example is Klöckner. It's a steel wholesale. They basically set up a whole marketplace for steel. And now less than 50% what they sell is not going through their plants anymore. But they make well money on it. And even on the legal side, I'm sure this is from Better Curler, they have a kind of application, especially for HR, to make sure that all the lawsuits are reasonably managed. And to make sure that their customers can, let's say, make the right decisions. So they're not trying to sell, let's say, a lawyer, now they try to sell equipment or applications to make sure that you can manage it in a good way. And you see it also in the hotel business. So point I want to make is, there's a lot of going on as you look to digital. A lot of things we don't even see. But on the surface beneath, there's a lot of dynamics. Now, and then you might say, okay, who's going to take responsibility? Who at the end of the day is make sure that, let's say, our business models are adapted, that we have the right knowledge. Is it HR? Is it marketing? Is it manufacturing? Whose responsibility is at the end of the day? That's why a lot of companies say, yeah, we need to change, but who's going to start with it? Whose responsibility is it? We see in some companies is HR is trying to make sure that the knowledge is there and that people are trying to cooperate. But that's a difficult discussion. Sometimes the CEO. But most companies are managed financially. We want to make a kind of return. We want to make sure that we make more money than last year. So we operate the company financially. Was at the Gartner event last year, and what you see is that if we don't try to make sure that we make failures, then we're not going to survive, basically. If you're going to make sure that we run the company financially only, and we try to increase our profit and revenue every year without, let's say, really innovating, then we will have a big problem. And there was an interesting slide which Porter also had in his article. He said, well, basically our organizations are not, let's say, fit to deal with this digital transformation. These sites needs to be more operating and not leads revenue and cost. They need to be sure that the ownership is let's say, that the goals are the same. And you see more and more companies like, for instance, ING in the Netherlands, they are organized around customer journeys. They say, okay, the whole team is responsible for instance, onboarding, service, or let's say cross-sell. And you see here, for instance, that IT and research and development have to cooperate with service. And that's a difficult situation because we have set up business units or companies in a siloed way. And there's no one right answer, but we all need to be aware that the current situation is not ideal to, let's say, to innovate. The interesting thing was that he said, okay, we have to separate data out of the operation, because that is a most important asset. As I tried to describe in the beginning, data is basically, well, the new gold, as some companies say. And then you get new jobs. You get disorganizer, you get hackers, you get, skill Sherpas, and for instance also floggers. You see a lot of new professions are coming into companies who take on new roles, which weren't there 2 years ago. So that's where you as HR have to deal with. So now the big question is this slide, you know, can we operate it, let's say, on a daily basis? Is HR able to, let's say, influence that? Can we, let's say, start small and make sure that the employees have the right things and feel well? Or have we take this corner? Do we really need to prepare our management and personnel for, let's say, these kind of developments which are coming? And that's a difficult one. Also, if you look to digital knowledge, what we see is 3 levels, basically. Sometimes customers say, I want to have all. I want to, let's say, operate it. I want to have the programmers. I want to make sure they can use the tools. I want to do the strategy and everything between. That's an illusion. The digital space is too complex. So if you talk about knowledge, the question is, on what level are you gonna, is it the management, or is it just people who, for instance, optimize your websites on a daily basis, make sure that your advertising is okay, people who are really good with customer data, for instance, or with customer service. So that's the 3 levels you need to think about if you want to invest in knowledge. What we see is that if you talk about digital transformation, often we've been asked, okay, make sure that everybody sees a kind of sense of urgency. So what I tried to describe in the beginning, what's going on, it might be that your company hasn't been hit, will not be hit in the next 1 or 2, 3, 4 years. Can be if you're a good product, good service, good partners, it might be. But what we see is that a lot of companies are struggling more and more because the dynamics are increasing. So you might say, okay, we start with inspiration and make it kind of create a kind of sense of urgency. The next thing is often, okay, what are we going to do? There's so many options. What is a next step? What will be our strategy? Where are we going to aim? Are we going to develop new business models? Are we going to improve? Are we going to focus on improving the customer experience and try to win the battle that way? The next thing is, okay, what kind of knowledge do we need and capabilities? Do we need to have programmers in-house? Do we want to outsource them? What kind of competencies do we need in our own building? Or do we need to partner with certain companies? And what I often see is that we believe what we've done also with IT, we outsource it, and then the problem is fixed. But also a lot of IT outsourcing projects, I'm not sure whether somebody has some experience, are not, let's say, being very successful because the partner often has to manage it on cost. And then innovation is also gone. So these are difficult questions. The next thing is, okay, how are we going to implement it? How are we going to make sure that at the end of the day, our websites improve, we get apps for our service, our products are enabled with, for instance, augmented reality? How are we going to do it? And the next thing is, once we have the knowledge, how do we keep it up to date? So these are, let's say, the 4, 5 angles you can take from if you look into the digital transformation knowledge. So what we often see is that it starts with inspiration. We've been asked, sometimes a marketing manager asks us, Hans, can you make sure that the management sees what's going on and make sure that we get the right resources so we get inspiration sessions, cases, or workshops? Sometimes we've trained 60 people and they all have developed on, they worked on 10 concepts. But also just capabilities. We need to do predictive modeling. We need to make sure that we have capabilities in our home to do the analytics, for instance, or on customer data. And there's often a longer training. For instance, we have a 4-month course of only digital analytics, just make sure that people are able to measure what's going on. And sometimes people say, no, we're gonna outsource that. Finally, then it has to be implemented, because if you just, let's say, have the knowledge and you don't do anything with it, it's also a difficult one. And then finally, you need to have it keeping it up to date. So these are, let's say, the 5 things you need to think about, which knowledge is in your company available. Now look into cases. We've been involved in quite some companies. If you look to financial services, what are the challenges of a financial services company often? Somebody here from a financial services company? Insurance or banking? Benchmark data, how you compare it? Okay. So you can compare your performance opposed to other financials, yeah. What do we see in financial companies a lot? Compliance issues, yeah, especially now. 25th of May has been done. There's also a thing. Do you need to have this knowledge in your company, or you try to have a lawyer to sort it out? There's also, yeah, a question. A lot of companies haven't answered yet. How are you going to deal with it? Well, what we see is, for instance, sometimes there's a big spread of knowledge. You have a few people who are dealing with digital, and a lot of people haven't done with digital. There's a big spread of knowledge. This means that some people have left school not so long ago and are really fresh in their knowledge, and other ones have taken, okay, our digital department's taking care of that. So we see more and more a discrepancy in organization, and they don't talk to each other anymore. Okay, that's digital, that's not digital. And we see more and more organizations now, they cannot afford it anymore because there's no linking pin anymore between those types of people. And so often we see that we've been asked to say, bring everybody to kind of same level of knowledge so that at least we can do projects together. Because some people are just trying to focus on what they've done so far. For instance, buying the traditional media or working with sales. So what we've done, we've been asked by a big financial company to, okay, make sure that everybody on a reasonable time frame has the online marketing knowledge at a certain level. So what we've done is we created an e-learning. We've gonna add every quarter a new topic, and we build in some tests and exercises to make sure that everybody has a reasonable level, a minimal level of digital marketing knowledge. The next step is, and that's not for everybody, to dive deeper into it, to make sure that, for instance, people can specialize on email marketing, on social, on content, or on analytics. And that's one thing you cannot do. What you need to decision, what we call a T-shape. You have a kind of general level, and based on that, you have a kind of 1 of 2 specializations. It's not possible in this world to understand everything completely. So you have to make a decision on that. We also had a retailer. A retailer, for instance, you see that the buying department within a retail company is often quite dominant. And in the past, they were trained to buying good quality products for a reasonable price, and it was displayed at the stores. With digital, you see that the assortment is much bigger, and that a lot of buyers are not, let's say, adjusted to make sure that assortment also is in line with what customers want. So, for instance, how does a buyer know what the needs are? And what you see on digital, you can often do small tests, but also do small analysis to find out which colors, which products people like. And we had two retailers. We had one retailer who said, okay, we want to move fast and make sure that the knowledge gap between suppliers and our own people, that has to be smaller. Because you see that the suppliers, the FMCG companies, but also digital marketing companies have often much more knowledge than the retailers themselves. The gap between the colleagues is quite big. Suppliers want to spend. They normally are advertising in the media of the retailer, but they say, no, we want to do it online as well. E-commerce is growing, and a lot of retailers are not prepared for that. And I think that's one of the reasons why retailers are struggling. So we've been asked by two different retailers to come up with a solution. One said, okay, we want to do 2 days, and we want to do the whole lot. From category management to e-commerce to advertising to keyword analysis, and mainly focus on knowledge transfer. The other retailer said, no, we want to separate that. We want to make sure that the management has a kind of knowledge. The non-specialists, for instance, the buyers, need to be able to do, for instance, keyword analysis, make sure that they interpret their website data accordingly so that they can find out what is needed. And we're going to train specialists. And we're going to spread it during a period of time. And finally, we want to immediately put it into practice. So once we've done that, people should immediately come up with solutions, improve websites, come up with advertising campaigns, adjust assortments, etc. Guess what? Which retailer has a higher return on investment? It was a lesson for us. We shouldn't have done the first one. It was a real lesson for us. We already had some doubts that you cannot, let's say, learn people in a couple of days a lot of digital capabilities. That's impossible. It needs time to be put into practice, but it needs some time to so people understand what they're doing. So my advice to you is, for if once you're gonna educate or train or try to increase your knowledge, don't do it too fast. There's no fast way. Finally, we have an international nutrition, animal nutrition company. In the Netherlands. They are working in 70 countries, and they came to us and said, we have very small marketing departments in Brazil, in Russia, in Vietnam, in Serbia, but we do know that it is important in all those local countries to have an online visibility. Once people are looking for nutrition, we need to be found. And we want to make sure that in all those countries we have a strong digital presence. There's an example out of China, I think. So the challenge is, they saw that the competition is growing, digital is becoming more important, and the customers are moving online, also e-commerce. That was, let's say, their challenge. So they want to put more focus on digital, they want to implement CRM, and e-commerce is becoming more and more important, and they want to have a strong digital foothold. So that was their need. But sometimes it's only one person at the marketing department. So that the head office with, I think there were 6 or 7 marketeers, and the rest were sometimes 1, sometimes 2, and Brazil, for instance, had 3. But they said we need to invest now, because it's now early days, and our competition is investing more in e-commerce and on content that we might get behind. So what we've done is, in phase 1, we created a kind of framework to make sure, okay, how is the farmer journey looking? For instance, in phase 2, we are we are investing on a basic knowledge, because in Poland they were quite advanced, but in Russia they weren't. So they want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. In phase 3, they wanted to make sure that the knowledge has been applied into practice. So every country knows what they want to do. And that's the whole thing with digital. You cannot do it all. You have to make choices in that. If you do everything a little bit, then you're getting nowhere. So here's important to make the right choice. And finally, you have to implement it. So there were the 4 phases they went for. Now, phase 1 is to, let's say, also get buy-in. Because you can imagine, if you're a marketeer in Vietnam, you have a lot of things on your plate. You have to deal with sales, you have to deal with fairs. So the first thing is to make sure that everybody understood the need and the urgency of it. And then we work together on, okay, how does a farmer journey, for instance, look? And it can vary per country. And what should a digital marketing plan look like? And we used it for film, webinars, and that was, let's say, the kind of kick-off. The second one, we created e-learning. They had about, let's say, 2 months to go through the e-learning. And in the e-learning, they directly could apply it into their local situation and apply it. And we used it for webinars, coaching, but they could do it at their own pace. In phase 3, and that's what we couldn't do online, they all came to the Netherlands. So we had about 15 people, all kind of countries, coming to the Netherlands, and the goal was to make sure they had a digital marketing plan in place before they left. And we coached them, and we helped them to, in 1 week, they had 5 days to work on that. And also the management of the board of the host at the end of the day was there, so at the end of the week they had to present. And that's also a thing, you always are short of time. But we learned here in 1 week you can do a lot. And if you choose the right priorities, you can, you can, let's say, apply it and make all the choices. And that's the most important thing, make the choices. And now we are helping them to implement that. How are we doing that? For instance, we're going to start with analytics. So we're going to make templates so they can build their own analytics and make sure that they can monitor their websites with dashboards and know what's going on. The next thing is we're going to do email. We're going to make email templates. After that, we're going to make advertising templates. So it is a very quick way to make sure everybody's up and running and are doing it, because the biggest problem is, we need to do it, we don't have the time. And by, let's say, forcing people to, okay, we've got 6 weeks to have your first email marketing campaign. You have 6 weeks to make sure your conversion rate on your website is increasing with 10%. And once you put people in a kind of time box like that, you can achieve a lot of results. Are the best choices? I know, I'm not sure, but if you go to Facebook and you see the head of us, you see on the wall, done is better than perfect. And I believe in that. So you can, my point is you can do online a lot and help them and facilitate them. So what did we learn? The role of HR is crucial. We found out that if HR is not involved, these projects normally don't work. Digital is about people and knowledge. It's not about technology. There's so much technology, and the biggest threat you have, there's so much going on that you do too many things. And setting the right priority and getting the people attached to it is quite crucial. You cannot outsource it. You cannot simply outsource. You cannot go to a consulting firm and do it for us. The company need to do it themselves. And it starts with building up knowledge. Without knowledge, without a vision where to go and to try and to get a culture of failure, it will become difficult. And the sooner you start, the higher the return on investment, because at the end of the day, everybody will go. So the sooner you make sure you have a digital advantage opposed to, compared with your competitors, the higher return it will be. Because at the end of the day, it will be a dissatisfier anyway. And the knowledge needs to be put directly to practice. We've done a few projects where we're forced basically just to do the transfer of knowledge. And that's not enough. If people don't apply it, it hardly makes any sense. So once you if you evolve in such a project, make sure that at the end of the day there are deliverables. And they are not perfect. And that's a new thing we need to be aware of. What I tried to do in the beginning. It's better to make small steps improvement than, let's say, make the best plan and solution. All right, that was it. Thank you.